I think that starting focusing on Metaverse NFTs is probably a way that most people will have more success. Finding projects that have huge social media impact, community followings, grinding, spending time in the discords, figuring out how to get onto whitelists. Those are the things that are going to get you in, right? And that are going to get you those little pops, those little wins, and potentially big wins. And then, of course, you know, what I did was I went in.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Altcoin Daily. My name's Austin, here with Aaron, joined by longtime friend of the channel, Elliot of EllioTrades YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, boys, for having me. Obviously, we've met what feels like forever ago in 2019, and just seeing your growth of your channel has just been super awesome. You guys inspire me, and it's an honor to be on the channel always.
Appreciate you, man. And, you know, you're co-founder of Superfarm, you know, you're launching / just launched Imposters Play to Earn game. I want to dedicate, you know, a whole nother interview to that subject. That'll be released either tomorrow or the next day. But today, let's just talk big picture crypto market. So I know you probably get asked this question a lot, but crypto market in 2022, bullish or bearish?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I talked about when we first crashed in May or April of 2021, I put out a video called, were we wrong about the 4-year cycle? And effectively, I made the case that we are, you know, what I feel is that since 2019, if you ignore everything before 2019, you see a sort of 4 or so month sort of bull run from the beginning of June, for the beginning of 2019 into the middle of 2019. Then you see a cool off, and it takes a while to regroup there. But then in 2020, we get DeFi summer. Then in 2021, we get, you know, Michael Saylor winter, or whatever we call that, where we got like the first real penetration of the all-time high. And that lasted about 2-3 months. And then at that point, I was like, you know, it feels as though we're not getting longer cycles. It feels as though we're getting shorter cycles. And maybe you could say it's all one big cycle, as Willy Woo would say, you know, it's one big, but come on, that's not how people see it, right? And so I think the concept of bearish and bullish, I call them waves, right? Instead of calling them cycles, I'm like, okay, well, it feels as though we're in another wave. And you're seeing NFTs kind of have their own waves. And they're somewhat related to gas fees, somewhat related to ETH price, but they're also just kind of fundamentals there of when the NFT market goes crazy. Bitcoin has its own waves, and it doesn't seem to be that strictly related to the halvings anymore, right? It seems like there's about a 3-month sort of cycle that we see playing out, whether bullish or bearish. And so I do sort of feel as though that's the energy, is that you can't just say, okay, for the next year, we're going to be in a bull market, or for the next year, we're going to be in a bear market. I think that that's kind of the fool's, that's the trick, is oversimplifying right now. It's definitely seemed to have played out so far. And so I'm looking at 2021 as going to be a lot of different sort of polar emotions. 2022. Yeah, thank you. 2022 definitely started off rocky. I started saying about 2 weeks ago, where I started getting tomatoes thrown at me on Twitter, I said, you know what, guys, we're oversold, and we're going to have a bounce. The stuff about the Fed has calmed down. The Fed FUD is been digested. The fears around conflict in Europe has been digested, and I don't see any big, you know, red flags or any big changes that are going to stop at least a reversion back to a mean, at least a somewhat of a retracement for the next few weeks, maybe the next month or two. I see some bullishness, and people were saying, top signal, do whatever this guy, do the opposite of whatever this guy says, you know, because the reply guys get so salty in the bear market that's almost like the indicator, right? It's like, okay, when the market gets so salty and saying anything bullish becomes like controversial, that's when you kind of want to start getting a little more interested. And I started to feel that about 2-3 weeks ago. I think March 8th, I tweeted something roughly to the fact of, hey, I think we have a little bit of smooth sailing ahead because it's just been too bad. It's been overly bad compared to what we're really looking at. And so I was expecting some good stuff. cautiously, and it has played out. And so what I'm also thinking, though, is that there's going to be some pretty significant changes coming when the Fed interest rates do kick in June. When there are fundamental changes to the money supply, those will have effects in the markets. However, they also are being digested, right? And markets are clinical. They're not just one emotion, right? And so I think that there is also a Bitcoin narrative that I haven't seen for probably ever since we've been in this industry, where truly decentralized hard money is now something that people are really thinking about. Whereas before it was more of a kind of like, post-apocalyptic fantasy, the idea of money really dropping away or being completely untrustworthy. It's becoming much more common. You're seeing conflict in Europe create a need for outside money, as they would say, and you're seeing a challenge to the rails on which the oil around the world is being traded. So all of these things sort of make a really interesting narrative for Bitcoin that's not an inflation hedge. And yeah, like I just say Bitcoin has a great narrative right now, which kind of counteracts this risk off from tech. So I think that there's a lot of reasons to be excited or to just at least remain cautiously optimistic about crypto in 2022. I don't think anyone should be going crazy because there's a huge chance we tick down. There's a huge chance that we're looking at a recession. There's all this data about that. But again, when things get way too overbought or way too oversold, the market corrects. And I think that's what we're seeing now is we're seeing a correction from bear euphoria, right?
For sure. So am I correct in thinking that you're thinking, based on everything you just said, that Bitcoin is likely to break all-time highs this year, and maybe even Ethereum going into the merge, bullish on that as well?
So I'm always bullish on Ethereum. I think it's just great. And however, I also feel like Bitcoin's narrative makes, like I'm sort of, I've said on my channel a lot of times, like, hey, look, if Bitcoin's going to bull, then Ethereum's going to go harder and altcoins are going to go even harder. So why am I betting on Bitcoin? And in a bear market, Bitcoin's going to go down. So why am I not holding Tether? And so, or USDC, whatever, UST really. But the reality is that right now the narrative around hard money has actually made me start dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin again in a more meaningful way than I have in years. And so it's been really interesting to start really splitting sort of my long-term holds again more evenly between Bitcoin and Ethereum, even though I do believe there's more upside in Ethereum. And I do believe that there is somewhat of a hard money element with Ethereum. Yeah, so I'm excited about Bitcoin. I'm excited about whenever there's good news in the market for Bitcoin, it's going to be great for altcoins. It's a very wonderful thing where it feels like, conflict is good for crypto. It feels like risk on is good for crypto. It feels like inflation is good for crypto. It's starting to feel quite like a tornado of good situations for crypto. Obviously, the biggest headwind would be regulation. But again, I never underestimate politicians and a nation's sort of greedy desire to collect taxes on a new industry. So I have a feeling that that'll be good for crypto too.
Yeah. Thinking back to 2021 and even like 2020, like because there's so much strength in Bitcoin and Ethereum, other things, other narratives were bullish as well, like 2020 DeFi, 2021, alternative layer ones, NFTs, huge in 2021. Thinking forward into the midterm, what types of narratives are you bullish on? Layer twos, NFTs, different kinds of NFTs, play to earn, Metaverse? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so layer two is a huge movement, and that is undoubtedly one of the most important movements in the industry. So at a certain point, layer two will become hyper relevant. I think it's really bullish for ETH, right? The layer twos coming together. So in the end, it's really good for Ethereum, right? Probably the easiest way to play the market is to split between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Obviously, that's old news, but it really exposes you to a lot of what's going on, whether NFTs, DeFi, or the other. Obviously, I have dedicated years and years of my life to building a game based on NFTs with the future of the metaverse in mind. So I'm objectively extremely bullish on these being the sort of ways that people will interact with the blockchain, that they will interact with the underlying protocols. In the end, I have a very simple rule. More users will bring more value. And I think it's a pretty it's pretty well proven out with data. What we saw with Axie Infinity was that they started attracting users, and there started to become a lot more value. And I believe that games are the most likely products to attract users, and that after a certain point, being on a non-native L1 doesn't make as much sense. Of course, we just had the Axie Infinity hack for $600 million. So it brings up the difficulties in running your own L1. However, things like AVAX subnets and other types of situations, I believe, will become quite interesting, whether L3s above Starkware or, running on your own IBC chains, depending on how technically proficient you are as a team. I think that after a certain while, if your ecosystem is big enough, you'll need your own L1. And so I think people are underestimating the significance of application-specific chains. There will be a ton of application-specific chains for the best applications, right? Like if Facebook had their own, when Facebook has their own coin, right, they're going to need their own blockchain, right? They can't just spam Avalanche, right? It's just not going to happen, right? It's not going to be the way it works. When Google or Amazon have their own coins, they will need their own blockchains, and so I think that there's going to be a huge movement. Obviously, chains like Ethereum will continue to be important settlement networks, but I think there's maybe a little bit of over FOMO on competing L1s, considering how oversaturated that market will be in the future. And I believe that they will start moving towards application-specific chains. I think that that's an undeniable next step. Is look at Bored Ape, right? I would not be surprised to see Ape Chain at some time in the future. If they continue to grow, and Ethereum is the perfect sort of launch pad for projects, and after a while at scale you just can't continue to use ETH, especially if you have small dollar figure transactions. Love Avalanche, love Solana, shout out to the people holding Cardano. However, the reality is that I do think that at scale the next movement is going to be the application era of blockchain.
Yeah, and real quick, did you mention Bored Apes? I'm curious if you think PFP generative NFTs like Bored Apes are due for more of a correction. We've seen them correct a little bit. Do you think of, obviously, punks and apes, but do you also think of like Doodles, Clonex, Azuki as blue chips in the NFT space as well? And what are your thoughts on all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. When PFPs and the 10K projects first came out, I said, hey, look, this is pop music. This is verse chorus, right? This is the format for NFTs that gives you enough uniqueness as well as enough similarity to have non-fungibility, uniqueness. Hey, look, this is my image and it's unique and I own it and only me. But also, hey, look, there's enough of an interest in this type of image that I can actually get in and out of it. There's actually liquidity of people buying and selling. The 10K project kind of solved for this harmony between liquidity and non-fungibility. And so to me, that's like a format for a project, kind of like a pop music verse chorus format. There's going to be a lot of verse chorus songs. Some of them will be major hits. Some of them will be dynastic hits of the decade. And it's just gonna go like that. I think it's a great format for a project. It's the format that I just released a project in. However, I wouldn't say that betting on that as a sector is something that makes any sense, because it's so easy to crank one out. The success of Bored Apes, it shouldn't be compared to some other 10K project or PFP project. However, are PFPs, in my opinion, more bullish than most other types of NFTs right now? I think so. And that's because the current state of our online interactions makes these useful for the identity use case. We see most people pursuing a tribal sense of belonging with these NFTs that they hold and they buy for themselves. Now, of course, a lot of people are flipping, and that's great. That also makes PFPs a great example of a project, because they're great for people who are looking, who see undervalued projects and want to flip them. The 10K generative projects are actually really good for that, because they, if you know what you're doing, you can see undervalued traits. You can kind of be smarter than the market. So they're great for trading. but they're really great for that use case of identity. And that's where we've seen the sort of explosion of utility primarily for NFTs, which is people want to use them as their avatar. They want to be this thing. And I think that that's a really significant data point that people kind of overlook. Most people have identity. Most people have a need to belong and a need to associate and a need for an identity. And so I think to downplay the significance of identity online is very, 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 very silly. And I think that the desire for people to express their identity, especially through possessions, is very, very strong. And so when you put these two things together, it's pretty clear that this is a really important part of NFT. A really important part of being online is how you express your identity through the stuff you own online. So the answer is yes, I'm bullish long-term on identity through NFTs. Does that mean that your salamander is going to go up in value? Probably not. It's probably going to zero. But the reality is that some of these are really connecting, and people really have a deep connection, a profound connection with the collections. A recent one, Azuki, has really surprised. And, it seems like it's only getting stronger, that one. And so, yeah, like there's blue chips and there's new chips, as we say. I'd say that really anything that is in the Yuga family, the Bored Ape family, is quite a blue chip. I would say that you're looking at the new chips like Azuki, Clone X. And I'd say that I don't know which direction the prices are going to go, but I'll say that if NFTs are to succeed at all, and if they are to become sort of long-lasting possessions online that hold and grow in value, it's pretty hard to see Bored Ape failing. It's pretty hard to see some of these blue chip projects failing, because that would sort of be a bit sort of corollary to NFTs failing. And so what could be the prices? Could there be nuclear winters? Could there be all these things? Of course, we don't know. But I will say, if you look at like how many NFT bull runs there's been since 2021 started, you have this sort of January, February wave. You have this sort of May to June wave. You have an August to October wave. And then now you have this January to sort of February wave of 2022. And now you're seeing, some resilience in the market again. And the only thing, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, that I can really think of that's had that many waves so much at the beginning of its life is Bitcoin. Had a lot of these early waves that were smaller and sort of built bigger. And so as an asset class, I feel like it's having a sort of early Bitcoin moment. And I don't think it's very corollary to specific altcoins or altcoins as much as it is to just sort of a new thing. And that's the optimistic view. The pessimistic view is it's all going to zero. Be careful. And you should really be really careful with your NFT purchases, because as much as I'm a long-term believer in this technology, this is way out on the risk spectrum for cryptocurrency in general. It's very, very risky. As much as I believe it's also a land of opportunity, it's also a huge, huge land of threat and risk. And so you just have to be prepared for significant losses when dealing with NFTs.
As we wrap up this, first off, I want to remind the audience, all just opinions, not financial advice, make your own decisions. But having said that, Elliot, we cover the whole market, but whenever somebody has serious questions about the metaverse or really want to go in depth with NFTs, I always recommend your channel. He puts out great content, has a great perspective, and you have, in my opinion, for years, before it was popular, the trend of NFTs. So I'm going to throw you a fun thought experiment for this final question. Let's just say throughout the rest of this year, Bitcoin does fine. Say we don't go, into a recession. The majority of people are in crypto to make money, and they see this new industry, the metaverse, NFTs, crypto gaming, and they're like, oh, what are some practical steps to make money in this space? So my question to you is, let's say you were tasked with becoming wealthy in 1 year with crypto gaming, with the metaverse, or you die. What are some practical steps you would need to do to accomplish that?
So the political answer to this, let me know if I'm coming in clearly. I felt like I chopped up for a second. The political answer to this is to say, invest with your time first, not with your money. Because with a certain amount of time, you'll develop not only a sense for when things are looking bullish, when projects have upside, and you'll also get that gut feeling, like I did a couple of weeks ago, saying, you know what, it's time for a run. When you start to really see the signals, some of which are data points, some of which are maybe just internal what do they call it? Intuition. So the more time you spend, the better you'll be in this industry. You'll just have seen the patterns. You'll see the writing on the wall when there's a run loading. You'll know when a community's strong and when a dev team's doing what they need to be doing to keep people energized and to keep the motion of the ocean going. The other thing is, you know, if I was just going to say like unfiltered, what you'd be doing is knowing that a lot of the coins that have done big token sales for a specific game, I think that is, you know, I think that until the game has huge user base, it's going to be hard to see whether that token metric is done right. I think that focusing on Metaverse NFTs is probably a way that most people will have more success. Finding projects that have huge social media impact, community followings, grinding, spending time in the Discords, figuring out how to get onto whitelists. Those are the things that are going to get you in, right? And that are going to get you those little pops, those little wins, and potentially big wins. And then, of course, you know, what I did was I went into some Discords, and that's when I found Bored Ape. I found Bored Ape in May of last year, a couple of weeks into their life, and just being in that community was infectious. I was freaking out seeing the activity and how passionate people were about these ape pictures. And so I started covering it, and everybody thought I was an idiot. And I was buying them, and even buying them for a few $1,000s at the time. I was like, am I crazy? You know? But when you have a play that you have conviction in and you think that it's going to be the real deal, like for example, apes, I've never sold any of my apes. Because the reality is I was just sure that they would keep growing and delivering. And so, you know, when it was hitting over 100 ETH floor, I had everybody DMing me saying, hey, like, you need to take some profits. Dude, come on. I was just like, I don't know. They have their ape coin coming and they're going to be doing this metaverse. I'm here for the ride. Right. And so sometimes having a few high conviction plays that you're very, very sure are the real deal. You're not going to win them all, but having a few that you believe in diamond hand, after, you know, doing the grind, getting some whitelists, taking some profits, that's going to be the thing that really gets you there. Is if you get into a project pretty early and you just stick around to let them grow. None of it's guaranteed, but that's the reality. A lot of my biggest wins have come from just long-term determined holding, and just being in there long enough, being in the industry long enough to sort of separate the good stuff from the other stuff and say, you know what, this team has what it takes. And so even if I lose on this one, I know that this formula will play out to my favor at some point. And so, yeah, as long as Bitcoin doesn't go to Goblin Town, I think that some games, not all games, the games that are able to appeal to mainstream users, build mainstream user bases and numbers, those are really interesting, extremely interesting to me.
So if you were tasked, like the question, to make, you know, $1 million in a year or you die, you would stick to the metaverse, you would stick to NFTs. You wouldn't be necessarily in fungible tokens.
No, I mean, you could. There's tons of fungible tokens that go on runs, altcoins. I'm personally, because of the nature of my work, I spend so much time thinking about and focusing on NFTs and games and metaverse technology. I find it easier to allocate sometimes into that world. And you know, if you look at the charts, there's a part of me that feels like the good NFTs have less downward volatility than some of the good fungible tokens that have these blow off tops. Even the best of them have these horrible blow off tops. And it's because you know, so much of the supply gets eaten up by long-term holders and idealistic holders that there's just not enough to dump. You know, there's just not enough floating out there to dump. And the type of people that collect some of the bigger NFTs are not the type of people that are very price sensitive. And if something goes under their buy signal, they'll just scoop it up and that stuff gets taken off the market. So, quite interesting. I'll say that most of the people that I know that quote made it to, you know, the 7 figures in 2021 were doing NFTs, or they were good about taking profits on the metaverse run. And so I think, or they did meme coins, which is, you know, a bit more luck. And so to me, it's like any narrative can be your pony to ride to Valhalla. But I do think that I've seen quite a few people do really well at NFTs. Again, it's super risky, right? So if you're trying to turn a very small amount of money into a very big amount of money, chances are you'll lose. But if you stick with it and you say, okay, well, even if I lose it this time and I lose it the next time and I lose it the next time, if I learn and I keep evolving, then, you know, at a certain point, I will put the pieces together and have the right outcome. But yeah, there's no simple, stupid, set it and forget it way to make $1 million from a very small amount of money. I could say go back in time and buy Bored Apes. I could say go back in time and buy Bitcoin at $1, but we all know that the reality is that most people, if they bought for Bitcoin for $1, would have sold at $10 or would have sold at $20. So, you know, there's no substitute for experience. Spend your time, learn this industry. The more that you spend your time here, the more likely you are to have success, period.
Do you think it's more advantageous in the NFT world if you have the capital? If you have the capital, is it more advantageous to get in on the whitelists and, you know, try and sell into strength and maybe hold some? Or is it more advantageous to just, if you have the capital, stick with the blue chip projects like the Azukis, the CloneX, whatever you think that is? And then, you know, at that point, you could, if it's, you can buy it at a 10 ETH floor and it goes to 20 ETH, you made 10 ETH as opposed to just 1 ETH per thing. What do you think?
Mike, it's the same micro to major coin thing, right? It's more likely over time once a project has huge traction and huge funding, right? Like Azuki right now, they have so much money, right? They've got so much money. Chances are they're going to do something with it that is positive. You know, NFTs, the bar to release them is pretty low. So, you know, there's going to be oversaturation of bad stuff. So if it's something that you don't have huge conviction in, I would say that taking profits off of whitelists is a good way to kind of like build your initial capital. Using your time and effort to grind your way and figure out how to get onto the allow list, get onto the whitelist, finding free mints, just really getting deep into the community and squeezing into as many promising projects as you can. But then once things start going well, just saying, okay, well, let me take a bigger bet on this one. Maybe there's an NFT that's worth 1 or 2 ETH that you feel like is going to make it to the 10. Then maybe there's an NFT at 10 that you feel like can be the next Bored Ape, like the Azuki holders have been telling me for so long. Again, I feel like I haven't given a very clear image here. So I just, the reality is that NFTs, when they get really too hot, you start seeing a lot of bad projects come out. And so, you know, in the end, there's no guaranteed way. But I do think people who spend enough time in the community, that's the thing I want to keep coming back to, is you can't just expect to come in and have whirlwind success. You just got to come in and expect to pay your dues and to spend your time learning. And if you do that, I know that you guys and I have been in this industry now for years and years and years. Our biggest wins have always come with more experience. And so that's just how it goes, right? The more time you're in the industry, the more you're going to be able to identify a great opportunity without having you'll be able to see it. You'll be like, this is a high conviction play, and you'll be able to identify it quickly. And so, you know, that might take you 1, 2, 3 years, but I can promise you, and I'm sure the Arnolds can promise you here, that once you get there, it's phenomenal, because you'll be able to say, okay, you'll be able to identify your bad decisions, cut your losers quicker. You'll be able to identify your winners and have more conviction and go harder on those. And so just spend time and everything else works itself out.
Absolutely. And to echo that, I would say, you know, you learn stuff from the wins and you learn stuff from the mistakes. You learn stuff from the bulls and bear markets. So, I mean, number one, get those 10,000 hours in and just, you know, download data from just being in this space. But anyway, Elliot, thank you so much for sharing your time. I always love the very reasonable perspective you bring. Links are down below for yourself, but final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily audience.
Yeah, you know, when things get difficult, as they have been in 2022, is when the real people who, quite frankly, deserve to have the wins sort of stay and dig in their heels. And if you're only here for the easy times, then you'll never get those sort of storybook results. If you're here for the difficult times and you go through those difficult times and you grow and you learn and you continue to invest yourself either just emotionally and with your time, not necessarily even with your money, then you're going to be much more likely to be there for those historic opportunities to buy, to enter, to see these new projects coming to market. So it's really about just staying engaged, digging your heels in. And when things get difficult in crypto is usually the best time to be here. Most people only want to come when they see big green numbers. And that's the most dangerous time to be here, because it's most likely going to be followed with big red numbers, as opposed to the opposite. When there's huge red numbers, it's most likely to be followed by some green.
I love it. Elliot, thanks, man.